Hey, INDE 37, gonna do a little video on setting up your soldering station. That's why I have my safety glasses on. And then we will start making that little flashlight kit that came in your tool bag. Now this little guy right here, little Ziploc bag with a bunch of parts, that's what we're gonna start with. First let's look at how to set up our soldering iron. So here is my little station right here, and it depends, you know, how much room you have on your desk or your tool bench, and if you're right-handed or left-handed. But first of all, what we need to do is make sure our soldering iron is plugged in to the station. So we have a couple of parts here. Here's the power and the temperature settings. Then we have the iron, and we have the tool holder there. And you have this little sponge here. Now that sponge should be wet. Now in your kit, you probably saw this right here, something like that. Well, if you go get that wet, it'll swell up to a nice, you know, big size here. And that's there to help you keep the tip of the soldering iron clean. Now you might have seen other types of tip cleaning devices like this. This is like steel wool, but this is like brass, I think. Brass wool, right? And you just kind of jab it in there, or kind of clean off the tip there. And, you know, sometimes you might have seen people use this. This is like a stone, kind of like a sharpening stone, but not as hard. And this comes in handy when, you know, your soldering iron tip is really corroded, or you know, it starts to get dull. Now, soldering irons will have kind of like a flat chisel tip, kind of like you see on, you know, a larger like permanent marker, and so it does have a side that's flat. Kind of hard to see it with my camera. It doesn't want to focus on that little piece right there, but there it is. So plug your soldering iron into the station, and you'll see that there is a up and a down. So make sure that you are plugging in the right way. All of these little prongs go to the bottom. There's only one way it should fit in. It should go in, you know, nice and smooth, so don't try to jam it in there. Once it goes in, you can push it in firm, and then turn this cap here about like a quarter turn, and then it will lock into place. Okay, then plug in your soldering iron. It has a 3 prong plug right with the ground, so make sure it's in grounded, and these are they pull a pretty good amount of power, so make sure it's in, you know, an outlet that doesn't have like a microwave or a hair dryer that's going to turn on while you're working. Okay, so once we have it all hooked up, then we can go ahead and turn it on. We'll see the light come on. The light is solid on this model until you reach the temperature or the setting that you want. Okay, so now we're just going to go ahead and turn it all the way up. This will help us not just melt the solder, but get the metal of the parts hot, so that the solder touches the metal and melts. Right? We try not to have the solder touch the tip to melt. It should melt from the parts. Sometimes that's not always possible, but we're going to try it. So what I'm going to do is I'm right-handed, so I want the iron to be in, you know, this hand, and I have room over here on my right, and so I'm going to push my my controller over here to the right, and then I'm going to move this over here as well, so that I can easily pick it up with my right hand. And then every time before I put it back in the And the holder, I'm always wiping it off. Now we don't want to hold this in the sponge. The sponge will burn. And by the way, this is a real sponge, so this sponge came from the ocean. It was once alive. A synthetic sponge will not work. It will just melt. So don't try using this with a regular sponge. Okay, so that's all in place now, and my soldering iron light, that green light's blinking, which tells me, you know, I'm up to the temperature. Now I have given you lead-free solder. You'll hear it pronounced solder in Europe and maybe Australia or whatnots, but I've given you lead-free. Now this one right here, this does contain lead, and the danger of lead solder is that the fumes that it puts off are toxic. So the guys who still use lead solder after a long period of time, you know, you might want to go to the doctor, get a blood test. But they have a fan next to them, and you can't see it, but I have this fan next to me, and it's kind of blowing across my workstation, which is away from me, because even the acid core or the rosin core, we're going to use rosin core, does put off some little fumes, and I just prefer that goes away from me than I breathe it in. Okay? Alright, so while the soldering iron is heating up, I'm going to dump out the contents of this bag right here. Okay. And you'll see all of the parts. Let me come down here a little bit, see if we can focus a little more with my spiffy docu-cam here. Now, what we have is, this is called the board. Now, you can kind of see on the board that it has the college logo on there. So, I worked with a company called Low Voltage Labs, and this is their website, lowvoltagelabs.com, and they had a flashlight kit that the board looked a little bit different. And so what I did is I worked with them to design the board so it was a little bit smaller, had a little loop in it right there for like a key ring or a little string, and of course to put the Shasta College Technology Club logo on there. Okay, so here we have the board. Now this board, you can see there's holes through it. So this is a through hole part. This isn't surface mount. Surface mount we would solder to the very top of the board. But this one we're using legacy parts or old parts, and they will actually go all the way through the board, and we will do our soldering on the back side. Now another cool thing that Low Voltage Labs did for us is they labeled everything. Let's see if I can get this to focus here. There we go. So you can see here we have labeled D1 or diode 1, and it says LED here. And then you'll see that the arrow points to the hole on the left, and then it says long lead, right? So that means when we look at our LED, we see that one of the legs is longer than the other one, and so we're going to put the long leg in that hole right here on the left. Okay, then we have a little switch here. Oh wait, the resistor, and the resistor, right, is R1, and it's going to go here, and this is the this right here is the schematic symbol for an LED. This is the schematic symbol for a resistor, R1. That was my daughter. That's why I was like, we're all at home. school, and so everyone's at home. I need to get like a little sign I put on my door. Hey, shooting, I'm live here. So here's the schematic symbol for a resistor right there. And then that's a good pointer, man. That resistor is a good pointer. I think I might use that. And then we have S1 or switch 1, and this is the schematic symbol for a switch. And that switch in this symbol means that this is a normally open switch. So the connector at the top is not touching those two leads, so that means it is normally open. In this case would mean normally off, and we would need to press the button to connect those two pieces of the switch and turn the light on. And then we have BT1 or battery 1, and this is where our battery goes, and we can see down here it tells us the type of battery, 232 battery, positive side up. Okay, and so here is I showed you the resistor. Here is the switch right here, and it has 4 leads. Here is the battery holder right here, and it's got 4 leads, and the holes are there. Yeah, so the other part that you have, you might have noticed, well, there's one other part, and that's this guy right here is the other part. Now this, what that is that's a holder for the LED. It holds the LED in place so it doesn't get knocked off or broken. So here is an example of a completed flashlight that another student has done. And so we have the battery is in the battery holder, the switch, the resistor, and then here is that holder right there. And you see how the LED fits in pretty snug in the front right here. There's a little space. It's kind of hard to see, and bring my light a little bit closer. There we go. So there's space in here for the LED to sit, and those leads come out the back, and then this kind of just sits down on the board, and it's held down by the leads that are soldered in the back. So here's a soldering job. So it's okay. You can see that right here it looks like they melted part of the board a little bit, and that happened because a student put the LED on backwards, and so the light wouldn't turn on, and so they had to heat up that solder and then pull the part out and solder it back on. And there are tools for rework. There are little things like a solder sucker or some solder kind of like ribbon where it will suck that solder up out of there, but it looks like that wasn't used here. And in reality, and so let's see if it works. Press a button and the light turns on. Not real bright. Now in reality, the student could have just switched the battery from positive side up to negative side up, and then it would have worked. But you know, of course, I didn't tell them that, right? They had to figure it out. Now, so if that happens to you, you'll know if that's what you did if you turn the battery upside down and you see the light turn on. Okay, so here we are. We have all our parts right here. I'm going to go ahead and put the LED in the little holder. Now I know that the long lead goes over here, and the long lead also corresponds, and let's verify that over here. So positive side up. So kind of hard to see. And here, the long lead right goes to the left, but if you look, you'll notice that the LED also has I'm gonna have to work on how to get this to focus here. So it has a flat spot on one side, right? So we have the long LED is on one side, and then there's the flat spot on the just the little edge right there. And if you look here at this LED really close, if it would focus, you would see that that there's a flat side over here as well. So I'm going to put the long LED over here in the left hole, so that means I'm going to have to put it through this little holder. I'm going to put the long LED through first, and they go through the very outside holes. So that one is in, and then there we go, right here. Okay, so that can just kind of hang out right there for a second. Okay, now it's going to be kind of hard to do this without something to hold this board, some sort of work stand, or now I didn't bring that one home, but at work I have what looks kind of like a tie, fly tying station, and maybe that's what it was good for, but it had a nice heavy base, and it had a lot of the alligator clips that you could move around and tighten, and then a magnifying glass, so you could see some of the small work, but I forgot that at home. Here's an example of another type of stand. I'm just going to move this over and maybe raise up my camera again. Here's another type of stand that that they make for holding soldering boards. Now, maybe you have something similar that you use when you paint models or something, or for fishing or whatever. But this, allows it to move pretty good. I'm gonna get some more light over here, and allows us to put the board in and tighten down. So, for example, if I put this board in here, it would hold it. Now, in order to hold it snugly, I have to tighten down these little fittings here, and these have springs on them. Loosen. Looks like that one does not have a spring. Just this side over here, and not get it nice and tight. So I'm gonna go ahead and put the board in there, and then squeeze it and tighten it, and that will kind of hold it nice and tight. And then I can solder, put the pieces in, and then turn it over and solder on the back. Now, you might not have one of these, and so you might have to find something that will work. Now, one thing that I've found works pretty good are these binder clips right here. I could put the part of the board in here, kind of hold it up, not very firm, so it's it'd be nice if I had something heavy to kind of weight it down. And as I was looking around my desk, I found this little guy, and this is part of my monitor mount that I wasn't using, and so I was kind of looking at it going, well, maybe I could hold the board in here like this, open it and close it, and that gives me kind of a nice edge that I could put some pressure on when I'm putting those parts in. And there might be other things around. If I hadn't drank all this soda, I could probably have clipped it onto here, or something. I'm sure you'll be able to figure something out that can hold it, and so that you can do the work. Okay, so let's go ahead and start putting this in, and I'm going to do the inside parts first, so that the outside edges are free, so that I can use a clamp or something like that. So I'm going to first put in the switch. Okay, it's one of the inside parts. Let me get down here a little bit closer. Now, I forgot my reading glasses in my truck, but I do happen to have these snazzy little magnifying glasses here that I purchased on Amazon, and I press this little button and I got a little light that comes on too, and they come in really handy. You know, it allows me to really get close and really be able to see the work. Now, so that I don't, you know, have to put my head so far down that I miss the camera, I'm just going to go ahead and use my safety glasses. It's not too bad for me to be able to look at it like that. Okay, I'm going to get a drink of water here first. All right. So, soldering iron's good. I'm going to go ahead and put this stuff, you know, just to set it over here. And what I've done is I've taken the solder and I've kind of wrapped it around my fingers so that I have, you know, so I have something to hold on to that I know won't get hot in my hand. Kind of gives me a handle to hold it to. So I'm gonna, you know, kind of hold it. And the great thing is about solder is you could just bend it around, or, you know, move it so that it hits the work at the angle that you want. Okay, so I got that all ready to go. Now here is the switch. Now if you looked at the diagram, this switch right here is very, you know, is pretty much what you see in the diagram. This top part of the switch is pushed down by the red button and connects with the bottom part. And so the top and the bottom are separate pieces. So therefore, really, it doesn't matter how we mount this switch. You see that it's, you know, the bottom's kind of square, but the little leads, right, the little posts here, they kind of come out to one side, and so we're going to put those in like this. And it doesn't matter if I turn it around 180 degrees and do this other side, and it really, right, so it really doesn't matter. So all you have to do is put the leads, you know, on the outside there where the holes are, and just stick it in the 4 holes, the through hole board. And I'm going to go ahead and push it down, and you'll feel it kind of snap. Not sure if you heard that, but you can see now that the switch is tight up against the board. It's about as tight as we can be, and the little posts, right, are pushing out the bottom a good ways. Okay, and the great thing is the way that they're bent, it holds them in. Okay. So now that the switch is through, then I can concentrate on soldering the back. So I'm going to turn it upside down, and I'm going to open this clip here, and let's see how close I could get so you can have a good view of that, and hopefully it will. There we go. Hopefully it will focus. Okay, so now I just have to make sure I don't burn the camera with the soldering iron. All right, now I have my my clippers here. Oop, there we go. I'm setting my camera at an angle. Maybe that was part of the focus problem there. Okay, so I have my clippers here. Now I gave you a set of these clippers because it's what we need for the labs with the card. For this board here, what we really need is something like this, where we can get right in there with the tip and clip off that solder when we're done. But if you don't have one, no worries, just leave it as it is. So, alright, so I'm going to then see if I can do this by looking at the camera and not at my fingers. Probably not. Right, it's like when I type, I gotta look at my fingers. Alright, so my soldering iron is nice and hot. And the first thing that I'm going to do is when I pull my soldering iron out is I'm going to tin it. I'm going to put some solder on the tip, and it's okay, right, that it's you know, kind of melts off. I'm going to kind of wipe it on the sponge. Okay, so just put some solder on there and then wipe it on the sponge, and it should start to get a little bit shiny. Sitting there, you know, hot for so long, it pretty much melted off everything. So as we're working with it, it'll be okay. All right, now so I'm going to get my my solder in a position where I am not bumping the camera. Let's see if I can do that. Okay. There we go. Alright. Hopefully that's nice and close. Okay. Get a little bit of that solder off there. Okay, so I'm going to get my solder and my hands in a place where I can put the solder right onto that metal post. Okay, so I'm just getting ready to touch it on there, and as it melts, I need to be able to have some, you know, some length here so that I can push the solder into the hot and molten puddle that we're going to create here. Now what I'm going to do then is I'm going to take this soldering iron, and I'm going to put it up against this metal post on this side over here. Right now my little holder isn't too heavy, so if I push too hard it's going to move. And then I'm just going to wait until it gets hot. And what I want to do is I want to touch the solder to the other side of that metal. You see it? Oh, there it goes. And that's it. So we've heated up the metal post and put the solder onto the other side of the post, so the solder didn't actually touch the soldering iron. Okay, now I'm going to put a little bit more solder on my iron, and the solder on the soldering iron helps coat it and transfer heat a little bit better. And so we're gonna, you know, clean it now, get it all cleaned off. You see now it's a little bit shinier. Okay, now we're gonna do the next one here. So I'm gonna find this flat spot on the solder tip, and I'm gonna put it up against the metal of the post, and then I'm gonna move the solder into the other side and just push them in. Okay, and let's take a look at that, see if we can see how that looks from the side. Just go ahead and take it out of there. So from the side, we can see that the solder has kind of built up a little puddle around that post. And yeah, I gotta, one of these days I'll learn how to focus this camera, how to work that autofocus, but you know, I haven't got there yet. I'll figure it out. See if I can bring that light a little closer, see if that works. There we go. That makes it a whole lot better. Okay, you can see the puddle, right, that it's made, and now that it's solidified. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and do the other 2 posts as well. I'm still going to do them from that side. Now I've used up some of my little solder lead here, so I got a little lasso, a little roping lasso. I'm going to elongate that little length there, and I like to bend it down just a little, so you know, it goes in there really well. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and pull my soldering iron out, and every time I pull it out, I wipe it on the sponge, and then every time I put it back in, I wipe it on the sponge as well. Now it's really important that you get yourself comfortable, and you probably can't see it because of the way, you know, the distance here, but and you know, of course, the focus is terrible again. Okay, so what I'm doing here is I have my arm leaning on the table, and I even, you know, keep my hand resting on the table too. And when I pull my soldering iron out, and you can't see it, but my wrist is resting on the table, and sometimes my whole hand is rested on the table, so I just have to move a tiny little bit. And if any of you have taken a welding course from Shasta College, one of the things that the instructors will tell you is that when you're welding, you have to make it comfortable for yourself. If it's not comfortable, you're not going to be able to have that range of motion to move like you need to, and you'll be sloppy, and the weld will be sloppy. And it's the same with soldering. You know, make sure that you are in a comfortable position while you solder, so that you're making little tiny movements, but you can control those movements very well. Okay, so let's see here. Get my light a little bit closer. Don't want it to be too bad, but okay. So I got my soldering iron here. Let's see if that light changes it. Okay. Got my solder here, right? Soldering iron is nice and hot. Now this time I'm doing these 2 posts here, and it is still comfortable for me to come from this side with the solder. So, and I'm going to do this one over here first, because I'm getting really close to this first one with the iron when it's over here. And what I don't want to get in the habit of is kind of going across my work, if I can help it. If this was a heavy part and I got to where I touched that piece of metal as well, then the part could fall through, or I could be putting extra heat into the part itself, and if I leave my soldering iron on that post right here too long, I could transfer that heat into the part and damage the part. So we want to do this, you know, as fast as we can, but make sure we do it well. Okay, so I'm going to bend my solder a little bit so that it's nice and comfortable. I'm just making little movements. I'm going to place my my soldering iron right here, and again I'm going to try to do this through the video here. So I place my soldering iron up against the part, and then I am using the solder to touch the other side of the part, and I'm just kind of feeling around until you know, that part gets hot enough, and then it will melt the solder. And I want to try to not, right, I'm trying to not touch the solder to the soldering iron if I can help it, but instead to this other part. This one's hard, so I'm going to really get my head in there. Make sure I'm heating up that piece. Come on. Well, let me tin my iron because the solder, new solder especially on it, will help the iron transfer the heat to the part. Okay, so I'm touching it, hopefully heating up that side. Come on. There we go. All right. There we go. Woo! So don't get discouraged if you feel like, you know, the part isn't getting hot enough. Then that might be, you know, cleaning it, you know, changing positions. Put a little solder on the tip of the iron. Now, if let me see if this other solder over here does a better job of tinning. You know, I really like to have the soldering iron nice and bright with solder, but it doesn't always. There we go. That's a little bit better. Put a little bit more on the tip there. Clean it off. Put it in its holder. Let it warm up a little bit. All right. So one more leg to this part, and then it will be done. Okay. So I'm kind of practicing my movements here with my solder before I even get my iron out. I'm going to go ahead and tin it. Now my desk is wood with a pretty good coating on top. If you're at your nice dining table or something, then you might want to get a piece of cardboard to set down under your work so that you don't burn the table or something. I'm sure your family will appreciate it. So, okay, I'm putting the soldering iron right up against that part, trying not to push it down onto the green of the board, because then it'll just melt the board and that heat could transfer into the board. Oop. There we go, and pushing it on the part, and as soon as I see that it starts to melt, it'll kind of get shiny, and then I'll try to pull away. Now on this one, if you can see here, the little puddle, that last one we did, it didn't feel like there was much solder on there like there was on the other two. I don't know if you could see that with the focus isn't terribly good, but you can kind of see that here that there isn't that much solder. Now, and in reality, the solder did go through the hole and filled up the hole, and that's probably good enough, but those other ones, I think I like them better. And even on this side, you see that there's solder in there, but on these other holes, they have a little bit of the bubble right kind of coming out. So I'm going to go ahead and put a little bit more on there. Now, right, we're practicing for like real life expensive board soldering, so we'll make sure that we get that on there really good. So I'm gonna got my solder in my hand again, wipe off my iron. I'll go ahead and tin the iron just a little bit with a little bit of solder, just to kind of get a little bit on there. And I'm gonna push the flat end right up against the part, and then move my solder in and there we go. And if you probably saw the solder become really shiny, right? That gets really shiny when it melts, and then when it cools, it kind of gets that more dull color, and that's what we want. We want that little dull color, and everything else looks pretty good. I mean, it's not going to hurt to have a little bit more over here. Okay, so there we go. There, that is the switch put on. So we turn it over, and we can see, you know, that a little bit of the, let's see here, gotta play with this focus here, that a little bit of that solder has come through. Yeah, anyway. Okay, so now that I have a part through there, it's not going to set on the ground flat, you know, because I have those little pieces off the bottom. So which is fine, right? I mean, again, if you worst case scenario, you know, if you have something heavy to put on one side, I think that'll work. But okay, we're gonna put in the resistor that goes right there, and so I'm gonna take the resistor here, and I'm gonna just kind of start to bend these pieces in. I'm not gonna bend them in right up to the resistor. We see here that well, maybe you can't. We see that the resistor itself doesn't take up that whole space, and so I'm just going to start to bend it kind of down and push those in just enough so that we can get them in those holes on the board. Okay, and then we can turn them over and just start to pull through that part, and you know, you can use your little pliers if you need to. Luckily this resistor is pretty small, but you know, some bigger ones, man, that would really take some pulling to get the wires bent and tight. So what I want to see in my light is that I am pushing that part all the way down, right? There's no space between the actual resistor piece there. You can see all the stripes, and we'll talk about those stripes later. And then I'm going to come to the other side, and I'm going to pull these legs, right, the posts on them nice and tight, and I'm going to bend them away from the board. Right, I'm going to bend them over there, and that will kind of hold the piece on nice and tight on this side. Okay, so I'm just going to bend them away. These, you know, posts here, they aren't very thick, so holding them, you know, kind of bending them away will hopefully help hold that piece up so it doesn't fall out. All right, so now we just have two pieces here for the resistor. I got my water bottle weighing down my camera base here. Okay, so we're going to again I'm going to get my solder ready so it's nice and comfortable to just push in here. I'm going to pull my soldering iron out and clean off the tip on my sponge. I'm going to just put a tiny bit of solder on the tip. You know, I want it to, you know, be able to transfer some of that heat to the part, and then I'll wipe off any excess. Okay, now for this part, I'm going to have to kind of take a different angle because I am coming in from the top here with the soldering iron, and then the bottom with the solder. So I'm still going to use the flat kind of chiseled point of the soldering iron, and if you feel like you need to rest it down on the board, make sure you're resting it on this the middle metal coating around the hole. So I'm just going to go ahead and rest that on there, and then I'm going to use the solder and just poke at that other side of that post, so the metal is melting. There we go. You see the shiny turn to dull. All right. So we want the metal of the post to melt the solder. That will ensure that the post itself, all the way through the board, is hot enough to melt that solder and kind of suck it down through that hole. Okay, let me tin my soldering iron again, and I'll just take off any excess. I need to extend my little lead here so I don't have to move very far. And again, I'm coming in from the top, and I'm going to try to heat up this side of the post here, and then this other side of the post is what we want hot enough to melt that solder. And I got to be careful here. It's kind of a tight squeeze here. Alright, so maybe I'll come in from the front here. Tin my a bit more on the tip there. Extend my solder. Okay. I'm going to lay this right up against that post right there, and then try not to touch the solder iron, but to touch the post. Alright, there it was. Alright, so now I have on there the resistor and the switch. Now you probably have kind of got this by now, so feel free to not watch the rest of the video if you feel like you have a good a good idea of what you're doing. Now on this piece here, because the little legs are so long, I'm going to go ahead right now and cut off these legs so I don't have to deal with these things poking out. Maybe my look at that, the tips of my cutters aren't coming together, so I'm going to have to come a little bit farther back here. Nope, these cutters are terrible. Alright, it's going to be next on my list. New cutters. That's what happens when you use it for everything, like cutting nails. Alright, so that worked just a little bit, so I got those off. Alright, so now go ahead and feel free if you want to continue on, and you can forward the video or skip to the end if you want. I'm going to go ahead and finish the rest of the board, and for those of you who want to finish with me, great. Those who don't, that's fine. Okay, so next I'm going to go ahead and do the battery holder. I'm going to do that because once I put the LED on the front, I'm not going to have anywhere in the front to grab, and the LED or the battery holder leaves a little bit of space back there to hold on to. So I'm going to go ahead and put this in here. Well, I don't need it in there yet because I got to put the battery holder on now. So this battery holder here, has some of these little little lines and kind of match those up with the shape of the battery holder. And so we can put, this is the back, right? The battery won't go past there. This is the front where we slide the battery in. So I'm going to put it on like this, right? The shape kind of matches those lines right there. Now this is one of those parts where it's not on very tight. So you know, we can deal with this in a few different ways. I think I have a needle nose pliers down here, and we can you know, hold it on and then, you know, bend these pieces over back, and that will kind of hold it on. Basically what I did with the resistor, but you know, these ends aren't nearly as long, and so you need a pretty small pair of pliers, and I'm really only bending it back a tiny bit, and it's still so loose, and it kind of barely holds it in there. Now if I don't get this tight perfectly, then you know, there should be enough spring in, you know, the little pieces here that hold down, that should still be able to kind of hold that battery tight. So don't you know, don't worry too much if you don't get it on there tight. Let's go ahead and put those in there. Now we could you know, use this little clamp to clamp the part on, and we could do that by opening it a little wider than normal and clamping down like almost to the end of that part, and that kind of squeezes the part. Now this is a kind of a big clamp, and if I am not careful, I could do this, right, and bend that little part. So well, maybe that wasn't a good idea. You can go ahead and just, you know, bend it back just by putting a battery in it, or just take it out and bend it back. So now if I have a smaller one of those, that, you know, that might work. You know, a smaller clamp. Let's see what I have over here. I got one of these, a little tiny one. Here might work. I just don't want to put too much pressure on, you know, because these do have quite a bit of pressure, you know, and bending the whole piece here. That black piece here is pretty strong, and we're using that as our spring. So let me see here if this will work if I clamp it. You know, try to clamp it right over where the posts go. It doesn't look like it's going to work. Alright, let me try this again, and I just won't worry about putting it in very tight. So I'm going to bend these with my needle nose pliers again, and I'm just, you know, it's kind of hard to see when it's in front of the camera, so I apologize for pulling it out there. And I'll do this one, and I'll just kind of clamp that one over. Flip this around too. Okay, so that will hold it tight enough, I think. So I'm going to go ahead then and put this back in the clamp here, and I could probably also see if I could fit something underneath there. What about this? What if I put this? There we go. So the weight of that part is on here. That kind of pushes those posts through. I think that will work. Sometimes when we do this in class, I have, you know, everyone partner up so one person can kind of put some pressure down on here. You know, this is a pretty small board. Okay, so with the soldering iron, I'm going to heat up the back side of this post, and then I'm going to put my solder to the front side of the post. See if we can get it to melt. Okay, so it's giving me some challenges here, so I'm going to go ahead and put a little bit of solder on there. Let's get my camera down here. There we go. I'm going to move this light a little farther back here. There we go. Okay. Get my iron right up against that part and hold it up there. And then I want the solder to touch the back side and to heat up and melt on the back side of this piece. And this part is pretty big, and so it kind of acts as a heat sink, meaning a lot of heat is going into that part on the other side, and so it dissipates that heat pretty well. So let's try this. I'm going to turn this around instead of trying to solder left-handed. Turn this around, and that way I can come in with my soldering iron from this side, and that way I can make sure I can get that flat end right up against this post, and kind of a little bit using more surface area there to poke on, or to hold on and get my solder underneath. Try not to touch the soldering iron. Come on, get up, get in there, heat up. Twist my soldering iron a little bit. There we go. Hopefully I didn't hit the soldering iron, but it looks good, so we'll call that good. All right. Now this next one, I'm not going to do the other one on that side. I'm going to go ahead and move over here. That way I have a connection to the board on each side, and I'm doing because I only bent over 2 of those really far. You can see that I bent this one over pretty good, and I bent this one over pretty good. So I'm going to solder on here, and then I'll use my needle nose and push those back straight up a little bit, which should be a little bit easier to solder on. So again, let me just tin the tip of this here. Okay, so I'm going to heat up the back side of this part. Okay, and then I'm going to put my solder on the other side here and just kind of test it, hold it there until that part gets hot. Come on, twist my, there we go, there we go, there we go, and whew, Got it. Clean off my soldering iron. All right, now see if I can do this without taking it out of the camera. Nope, can't. And I think I broke that little part of that piece off there. Bend up this one. Okay. So now I still have, you know, the weight kind of that part pressing down on this block here. So let me try to do these other two pieces. Okay, clean off my soldering iron, get my solder lead, you know, a nice big lead there, and then I'm going to go ahead and find my little flat spot of my iron. There we are. Give it a tiny bit of solder, and go ahead and put it right next to the other side of that part. Try to get as much surface area I can to touch and heat up, transfer heat better. There we go, touching the leg of the part and not the soldering iron. Alright, clean off the tip there. I'm going to go ahead and turn this again so that it's easier for me, you know, to get my soldering iron in on that side. Okay, so I'm going to tin the tip of the soldering iron again. Man, I wish I had 3D camera. Wouldn't that be cool if we could just, this is like 3D. Pretty soon we'll, not only will everything be VR or virtual reality, but that we can record videos in 3D for VR. Wouldn't that be cool? I know if you take anatomy, at least one instructor I know has worked with our library to do some labs in VR. So if you didn't know, our library has VR machines. Those were set up by our librarian Katie Leach. Alright, and so you can go check them out when the library opens again. Maybe you can even check them out. I don't know what the deal is. Go to the library website and I'm sure that you'll find out. Alright, so that's probably hot enough. I'm going to touch my solder to that, to that part. Get it in there. Turn my soldering iron, try to squeeze a little bit, put more pressure on there, and hopefully connect better. There we go. That's hot enough now to melt right on the leg of that part. Got enough, get enough in there, and then let's call that one. Then I think that I'll try to get it now from the other side. I'm not seeing a lot cool up on this side. The other side looks okay. I can still see that hole in there. So let's try again. And I probably don't have to hold that part in place now, because now we have 3 points that are soldered on, and this one is at least mostly soldered on. I'm going to go ahead and tin my soldering iron there, and I'm going to go ahead and push it right up against the part right there and let it sit there for a second and get hot, and then touch my solder to this other side. There we go. There we go. Push in. All right. You can see, I'm going to clean this off before I put it back in. You can see this kind of black stuff right here. This is the rosin, right, that's inside this this solder. So rosin is something that allows the solder to kind of flow, and like it does right there, and kind of fill in those holes. Now these are rosin core, so the tiny little hole in the middle of that piece of solder is filled with rosin. You can see it a lot better on larger diameter solder. You can also buy rosin in like a little cup, and sometimes I will just take the lid off, and then I'll set that rosin down alongside of my brass wool, and then I'll just kind of dip the tip of the soldering iron into that rosin, and it really kind of helps with the tinning of the soldering iron. It flows better on that tip, and then makes it easier in that next piece of work that we do as well. Alright, so I have now everything on there except the LED. So remember that we kind of put the LED in our holder previously. We have the long leg of the LED that goes in this hole. See where the arrow is? Now it says long leg over here, but the arrow is pointing to this hole right here. Okay, I'll make sure that my LED is snug up inside, and then I will putting the long leg in first. And be careful, because if you don't wait long enough, then those parts that we just soldered could be hot. So I'm going to go ahead and put the long leg in there first, and then kind of bend the whole thing to get, there we go, get the other leg in there. So now here we have those legs in there. Now what we need is we need to lay down this LED onto the board, except we're going to try to not have any space underneath our LED this go around here on ours. So what you can do is, if you hold the back side, and again we got to make sure the LED is nice and snug inside its little holder here, and then if you grab onto the legs on the back of the LED, and kind of hold them snug, and then you can push, here we go, push over the LED till it lays down flat. Okay, lays down flat, and then push these little legs up, right? Because we want that to be a nice tight corner. This right here to be a nice bend, and if we were to push back, then it would want to lift the front of that LED up. So we're gonna bend them forward towards the front of the board and out. So out and up. Okay. So now we have the LED that's tied up against that board, and these legs that are pointed up and out. Now again, putting just a little bit of pressure on the LED helps it stay nice and tight up in there. Now, so I'm gonna again put this in my little holder here, and I'm putting it on that little lip right here that's left over, so I don't want to put it in too far, just enough, right, so it holds it, doesn't crush. that battery holder. Back up a little bit here. There we go. Ah! Come on. I'm going to try the other one now. Let me see if this works. Nope, that's just, that doesn't work. My little makeshift holder here, but I figured it was fair for me to use this instead of my fancy one, since you guys won't have a fancy one. Okay, so now these are pointed forward and down, and if I want, I can put something underneath that holds that LED up right where we want it to be, put some pressure on it, and it really helps push those parts up and right into place. Alright, last part, getting my solder all organized here so I can have a nice long lead and a good handle to hold it by, and I'm going to do this farther one first, maybe, because I'm going to bring my soldering iron in from the side back over there. I'm just going to clean my solder. Okay, so I got the flat side of my iron right up against that lead, and then I'm going to try to push that solder into the leg and not onto the soldering iron, and just push in until, you know, I get a good puddle going. And then I'll do the same for this leg here. Try to get as much surface area of that soldering iron touching that leg, and then get that solder in to touch the other side of the leg, and just keep pushing in until, you know, you're making a nice little puddle there. Alright, clean off the soldering iron, and since that was our last part, I can now flip off the soldering iron. I mean, turn it off. I like my soldering iron. I wouldn't do any sort of rude gestures to it. I'm going to tend the tip of the soldering iron before I put it away, just so it's nice and protected. You know, I'll probably put more on there than I need, but now I'm going to put it down into my brass wall, and that does a pretty good job of cleaning it off, and it leaves some of that solder on there, and it's nice and shiny and bright. And then I'll go ahead and put it in the holder. And you can also, you know, put solder on it and then wipe it on the sponge a little bit, but just barely, just skimming the top of that sponge. You know, if you use it correctly, that sponge will last you quite a while. All right, now that I think these are cold enough, then I can bend. I can take that out, and I can bend these legs up, and I can bring in my clippers and clip them off. Now, again, my clippers are terrible because I must have used them for lots of other things. But it looks like they are what I have right now, and we do with what we have. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and try to clip off this other side. All right, so now here we have all of our pieces are soldered on. Those are nice, good looking puddles. Now if I planned on like keeping this flashlight like in my pocket, I would probably take a Dremel with a little grinder attachment and grind off those points, just to the top of the solder, just so they were nice and rounded, so that I could run my fingers across the back and they wouldn't snag or cut me. Okay, so now we have all of our pieces on there looking good. Now is the moment of truth where we will put our battery in and see if our light comes on. Okay, so it says up here positive side up. Now I gave you 2 batteries because when I opened this battery box, what I noticed, and each of these batteries sits in the hole of this tray, and there's probably 10 by 4 or 10 by 5 batteries in each tray, and the trays are stacked on top of each other in a good sized box. But I noticed that the box was opened upside down, and so some of these had actually fallen out of their tray and they were touching the other batteries, and when these kind of touch each other, they tend to discharge quickly. So I figured I'd better throw 2 of them in there so that if one didn't work, you'd have a spare. So let's slide that battery in there. You see these little springs that are going to hold it nice and firm. Okay, moment of truth. Let's see. Yay! Whew, I was sweating there, really hoping that light went on. I do one-take videos, no editing, so whew, that would have been embarrassing. I might have had to make the whole thing over. Probably not. I just would have grabbed another battery and put it in, or like I said, turn it upside down if you get that LED in wrong. So there you go, right here. Here is your completed flashlight project. And if you have an extra key ring, or one of these cool snazzy I don't know, got these on Amazon or Wish or something. Let's see if it fits. Oh, just too short. I bet if I really push it through, nope, I'd have to probably open that and try to push it in there. But I know it fits on a regular key ring because I got a couple of key rings that are on there. And just make sure that these aren't too sharp. And so what I want you to do for this assignment, right, is I want you to take a picture with your phone of the completed light with the light on. So you can just, hold your finger down on the button, snap a picture of the light, and then upload it to the flashlight project assignment Dropbox. All right, right on the course page there. All right, so by now you should have your soldering iron should be off. You want to leave it in its holder for a while so it cools down. If you are unsure if it's cool, don't touch it with your finger. Touch the soldering iron to the sponge, and if you don't hear a ch-ch-ch, then it's not super hot, but it can still be warm. And even if I just put my hand close to it, I can feel that it's still warm, warmer than I would want to touch. So I'm going to probably leave it there for about 20 or 30 minutes, let it cool down, kind of clean up some of the mess I made, and put everything away. All right, so you should now know how to use your soldering iron. If you are having problems with that technique, or if your soldering iron you don't feel like was working very well, then send me a text. We can Zoom and do a live video chat, and we can kind of troubleshoot some things for you and get that going. So my next video is going to be introducing the cards and how we use the lab kit with the cards. And until then, I will see you later. Thanks.